latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. I mentioned this at the beginning of the show as we were discussing the battle against Illinois, launched by the Trump administration, being joined by nearly 24 state attorneys general who had filed amicus briefs in support of the federal government's lawsuit against the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago for being sanctuary jurisdictions, and attaching some economic consequences to that, in addition to the public safety consequences for the residents of Illinois and neighboring states. This just in, criminals don't necessarily abide corporate boundaries. And I was thinking about this, too. So now that more attention is being paid to Illinois and Chicago, we often say on this show, preventable crime, both foreign and domestic, both imported and indigenous. So the imported is easy enough, and that's the nature of the sanctuary state and city litigation. The Safety Act. You know, it's unfortunate. I know our friend Ted Dabrowski at WirePoints has done some work on this, and more is coming, but this got almost no attention last fall, and it warrants ongoing attention. The analysis that former clerk of the Circuit Court Iris Martinez did on the impact of the Pritzker Purge Law, the so-called Safety Act.
Safety Act.
Ironically
being safe
entitled.
About it. I mean, come on.
In which she found, and this was a letter, you'll recall, she sent to both Tony Preckwinkle, as well as Tim Evans, the chief judge. Failure to appear by a defendant in 67,000, round number, 67,000 of the 91,000 cases, or 74%.
Jeez.
74% failure to appear. The proximate cause, they were released under the Safety Act.
Okay, so that proves that the Safety Act isn't working.
She goes on in her this analysis that she had conducted. Many of these defendants are charged with violent crimes against victims, including domestic violence, sexual assaults, attempted murders. For example, there were more than 12,000 domestic violent cases in the period that was studied, 14% of the total number of cases. Due to the 110% spike in domestic-related murders in 2023, an independent and thorough review of domestic and gender-based violence in the criminal and civil court systems is imperative. She concludes, Cook County leaders must recognize the financial and human impacts that 67,000 failures to appear to court have on case processing, staffing, victims, witness cooperation, and our law enforcement partners. Together, we need to ensure that victims, witnesses, lawyers, judges, and police officers are not attending tens of thousands of hearings without the defendants being present. Well, yeah, that would be novel. Not just a safety issue first and foremost, but a resource issue, which then becomes a safety issue, the misallocation of scarce resources. And so that's one snapshot of the data, of the impact. But there are stories every fracking day. And I don't know what we can do other than tell them. For example, 16-time convicted felon robs cellular stores while on pretrial release for 3 felony cases.
Come on. I mean, it sounds like something from The Onion.
For more on this and other law and order matters, pleased to be joined by former Riverside Police Chief Tom Weitzel. Tom, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for having me. Good morning, Dan and Amy.
You know, it's a bit frustrating. It was frustrating to get attention put on the Safety Act in the first place, to get it amended after Pritzker and Welch and Harmon said there was nothing wrong with it, but then they amended it after the 2024 election anyway. 2022 election, excuse me, anyway. But even the prosecutors and the sheriffs from around the state that we talked to, even though 100 of 102 county prosecutors in Illinois opposed the Safety Act, and as did most sheriffs and other people who are sane, it's just been difficult to get the follow-up to maintain people's attention to the impact here. The sanctuary city, sanctuary state, we get some high-profile cases, but there are high-profile cases of the impact of the Safety Act, like the one I just mentioned, and there are myriad others. And we're just not getting, I don't want to put it in one category here, but the combination of like those parties that are responsible for the criminal justice system and its administration, not enough attention, not enough discussion, not enough highlighting of these cases and the impact, a renewed pressure to do something with the current iteration of the Safety Act. Your thoughts?
Yeah, you're spot on, and the data that you referenced earlier about the letter that was written was like an open letter that was published in the newspaper is 100% on point. The way it actually works with the Safety Act is exactly what you referenced. Is failure to appear used to be, if you showed up in court that didn't show up in court as a defendant, the judge would put out a warrant. That's before the Safety Act. What happens now is you get them 3 passes. The first time, they'll just continue with 30 days to the next court date. And then the next 2 times you don't show up, you get a postcard. Think about how ridiculous that is. And most of the defendants have bogus addresses anyways. These really violent criminals, their address that they give a police department when you're booking them into custody is most of the time not valid. So these postcards are going nowhere, and then these defendants are continuing to commit crimes. And I can tell you that they're on either EM or pretrial release, and it's not getting any attention, and they're keep committing crime after crime and violating, having these violent crime happen, victim after victim. And I can tell you that's absolutely happening today. All for your listeners, all of my adult children are police officers in the Metro Chicago area, and I can tell you that's happening all the time. It's not getting any notoriety, but every single day they're arresting individuals that are out on pretrial release, EM, or have been, have just committing crime after crime after crime and being released. And a lot of violent criminals are still being given what's called a notice to appear, and they're not even hitting the first appearance court. They're being released from the police facility.
Well,
and we're not tracking those numbers.
Yeah.
Just so you know, when they put out that data, they're not putting out data as to the thousands of individuals being released from the police station. Nobody's keeping track of that data.
And again, just to put a fine point on it, this is not a Chicago issue. It's a statewide law. It's a statewide issue. I saw you posted about a missing Antioch woman in relation to the Safety Act.
Yeah, for sure. It is absolutely a statewide issue. And it's, there's some counties that are better than other counties, without a doubt. And like you mentioned earlier about dividing lines, these violent criminals, they don't know the difference between Cook and DuPage. They don't know where the Will County line is between the municipalities there when they go out on I-55 or 290 and they commit crimes and they flee back to the city. They have no idea what community they're in, let alone, what county they're in. But I tell you what, they're surprised when they get arrested in Oak Brook or Lombard or maybe somewhere in Will County and they're held in custody. They go to the first appearance court and the state's attorneys are pleading for them to be held, and they're held, and they're like, I'm not in Cook, like they don't even know, like in Cook County, I'd be released from the police station. And the significant thing about that is it's the same law throughout the entire state, but it's not being applied the same.
Yeah, but let's talk about that Antioch woman, Megan Boss, who was found in a container in a backyard. The guy that's been charged, Jose, Mendoza Gonzalez, he's out. He doesn't even have electronic monitoring on. He's at his house. The judge let him go. Hours later, he admitted that, she was in his basement for 3 days because he claimed she accidentally overdosed. He never called authorities. And then he took her body and put it in a garbage can. And all while her family is sick to their stomach, like physically out looking for her. And he's out as a free man until he appears for his trial in 2 weeks, and he may or may not show up for it. And I'm hearing reports that he's here illegally.
Amy, you're absolutely right. And that's a charge that he could have. So the state's attorney, they plea in front of the judge. He could have looked at the case and held him. It's not mandatory because it's not homicide itself yet, but they could have held him in custody or put him on EM. And I could tell you, I'm absolutely positive that Antioch PD or their task force is still investigating that individual, probably for homicide, drug-induced homicide.
So.
That charge may come down in the future, but he should be in custody, but he's not in custody because of what the judge did.
Well, and because, oh, by the way, the one state's attorney in Illinois, not named Kim Fox, Eric Einhart of Lake County, supports the Safety Act. And he was reelected by Lake County voters.
Exactly, and if you look up his campaign, Kim Fox was one of the first to support him in his run for office. So,
birds of a feather.
without a doubt. So, I don't know. I'm personally thinking that maybe the public, the tides are turning where they're getting sick and tired of parts of the Safety Act. The actual public, our elected officials are not. They're not. But
I guess the public needs to get sick of the elected officials who are not getting sick of the Safety Act. Some dots need to be connected, apparently. I wanted to get your take on something else, too. BLM Brandon is perhaps under political pressure having a change of heart on ShotSpotter. The report is that he's reconsidering re-implementing.
Good.
Yeah, so I saw that they asked for a request for proposal for companies, and ShotSpotter was one of the ones that put in, and I think his administration is probably telling them that they need to relook at that. It's a really good system. It's really accurate. Part of the information they put out was complete, nonsense. And all you have to do is look at the states and communities and cities throughout the United States that have ShotSpotter and look at their success and look at their data. Why was Chicago the only one that was the outlier? If you look at the honest data that they put out, where Chicago was the only one that was really slamming it, saying it didn't work.
It was racist.
And the state's attorney came out with a statement that it doesn't help in any of the cases or any of the prosecution. Well, of course, that's ridiculous. The officers wouldn't have made an arrest unless they got a ShotSpotter.
Right.
Well,
they wouldn't know people were injured or shot. Because you call 911 and it takes forever to get through if they even show up. And you could bleed out in that time.
No, but the argument was the real argument they made was it's racist because these are politicians that support lawlessness, even lawlessness that veers into the violent. They just do, and they are willing to sacrifice people's lives on the altar of racial politics. There's no other explanation for it. They run around, they basically tiptoe around it by saying, until Winnetka gets ShotSpotter, we're not going to have it on the south or west sides because it's racist. That was the actual argument.
Yeah, and you know what? Police departments throughout the nation, you put your resources where they're needed and you put the resources where the most crime is. We're not special here in Illinois, and if it happens to be the south side of Chicago where it needs more police officers, ShotSpotters, it makes, you're not going to put a device like that where they've had one shooting in 5 years. That doesn't make sense, and nobody would do that. The resources have to go where they're needed, and it's by where the crime's happening. It's not by the racial makeup of the community.
Mm-hmm. Well, does making sense in Illinois. I mean, those are things that don't usually belong in the same sentence. I assume you keep. You said you have kids in law enforcement, so you certainly talk to them. But other like brass and law enforcement, suburban, and around the state. I mean, what is their handle on these things? The combination of the Safety Act and sanctuary state and eliminating ShotSpotter, Tim Evans wanting to have a special court for people 18 to 26-year-old because their prefrontal cortex isn't fully formed and they're not responsible for the violent crimes they commit. I mean, just on and on. One idiotic idea, one dangerous policy after the other. And as I say, I'm not feeling the impetus coming from those who have responsibility for the administration of the criminal justice system to challenge the legislative and executive branches in this state.
Yeah, you're spot on, and I would tell you something that certain law enforcement executives don't want to hear. I would say there's a lot more sheriffs in the state of Illinois that will come out and speak the truth or speak facts because they're elected and they can't be removed from office by politicians. Police chiefs, local police chiefs, superintendents, whatever their title is, they're not. A lot of them are not speaking up because, quite frankly, they like their job and they're being threatened. They will be threatened by their mayor, village president, whoever. Stay out of this. Don't talk about it if you like your job, because they're a Democratic mayor or a Republican, whatever. They're directing their law enforcement agencies, and that's horrible. We need executives, police executives that stand up, and even some of the state organizations that Illinois Police Chiefs Association, other sheriff association, they need to come out with facts and data to show that this isn't working. But they have that data, Dan, but we're not releasing it because they don't want to go against the Pritzker administration or their own internal administration because, quite frankly, they'll be removed.
Well, and that's interesting. Well, I mean, there's ways to get the data into the public domain without your fingerprints on it. They should be a little bit more creative and or just compliant with FOIAs, because I know there are FOIAs around for Safety Act related data. Number one. Number two, just in terms of high profile, you need somebody high profile to break ranks sometimes to encourage the less courageous. What do you think about the job Larry Snelling has done under Brandon Johnson? I know it's difficult and you got to play the politics. I understand. I'm not naive, but what's your assessment of Snelling?
I like him. I think he's, from what I know, he's a good leader. I know the majority of the CPD officers, the rank and file, support him. There's no doubt he's being given directives from City Hall, from the mayor's staff. Every superintendent is. There's no question of that. But I do think that he pushes back a little bit to the point that he can. And one key point is if the rank and file, if the police officers are respecting you and they think you're standing up for them when needed, you'll have their support. And, not blanket, but you'll have their support. And that's really important because morale is huge in law enforcement, and thinking that your bosses are supporting you, I think is really important. And I've seen him stand up even publicly in some of his comments in news reports that I didn't see other superintendents do at all. So I do think he's doing a really good job with a very difficult situation. And make no mistake, sometimes mayors and village presidents, to stay out of it, they don't actually talk to the superintendent and they don't actually give him the directives. It's his staff. So they can have this removability. His staff might call the superintendent and say, you will put more officers down in the loop to stop this chaos going on of these kids going around causing havoc. Right. And they say, don't worry about the overtime, just handle it. And and they don't talk to the superintendent on that. They talk to the deputy first superintendent, or they talk to his chief of staff, because then there's this where they could say, well,
yeah, right. He knows where the order is coming from, right?
Right. And there's a lot of priorities that come out of City Hall. Make no doubt about it. When they tell you we're going to reduce overtime, but when the City Hall calls and said, you do whatever you have to do to get this under control, that means the purse strings are open.
Tom Weitzel, retired chief of police of Riverside, Illinois. Tom, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Hey, thank you. Have a great morning.
You too, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
Do you remember when you were a kid and you fantasized that your bicycle was a motorcycle? Maybe you even put baseball cards in the spokes to make it sound like a motorcycle. But it really wasn't a motorcycle. Sometimes things just aren't what you want them to be. Like, let's take your retirement, for instance. Sometimes it looks like the numbers are getting to a pretty high amount. Might be $500,000, maybe $1 million, maybe more. But did you factor in all of the things like inflation, taxes, unpredictable market activities, things that make the numbers not appear what they are, security in your retirement? Does it make you worry sometimes when you see market activity or you hear contradictory evidence of inflation numbers? Or what taxes will be on retirement? If these things make you worry, get nervous, even wonder if you have enough, well, then it's time to call Tom Fortino and the people of Alpha Wealth Group for a complimentary discovery meeting. And you can do that today. Simply call 630-864-6711. That's 630